I don't want to beat around the bush and I don't want to sugarcoat it. It sucks. Trying to figure out who the top tight ends are going to be or even draft them. So I'm going to do what the tight end whisperer does best, and I'm going to break down my top 20 tight ends heading into 2023. Ladies and gentlemen, there's basically a three-tiered approach to drafting the tight end position this year. Number one, you take Travis Kelce in the first round. Number two, you spend the next couple of rounds trying to fight over whether you take a guy like Mark Andrews, George Kittle, TJ Hockenson, or maybe even a stab at someone else. Or number three, you just wait towards the end of your draft and you take a lottery ticket on whoever you feel like will end up hitting this year. And quite honestly, the last few guys in the rankings are all interchangeable with like 15 other guys that could potentially be decent. But let's try to sort through some of this noise. I'm going to give you my top 20 and I'm going to kind of give you the risk factor on whether or not I actually think they're going to finish in that area. But keep in mind as well, if you're looking for more in-depth rankings, including Jake and mine's top overall 250 for every type of league that you play in, you need to get our draft guide. Rankings, cheat sheets, tiered rankings, almost 300 videos you can't find here on YouTube, and exclusive content that you won't find on any platform anywhere. And for only $21.99, this is one of the best bang for your buck products that you can buy in all the fantasy football landscape. There is a link in the description down below. Head on over to our website and get yours right now, because you're going to want to start studying up before your draft gets here. And you know what? If for some reason this video hits 1,000 likes, which I know is tough on a tight end video, I'm going to pick someone to give a draft guide away to for free. All right, let's jump right into it. And number one, no surprise, is going to be Travis Kelce. And honestly, there's probably a very good chance, and I would say like 99% chance, he finishes as the number one tight end. He's really the only reliable pass catcher that we know of right now in Kansas City. And there's guys that could break out and take the next step, but we know that Travis Kelce is going to be the guy getting a majority of the targets. And the best thing about Travis Kelce is, no matter whether a defense knows the ball is going to him or not, he still seems to get open more than enough. Number two is George Kittle, and I've got him as a ranking as number 3 right now. Just keep in mind, at the end of last season, Brock Purdy looked towards George Kittle to be his guy. And over the last few weeks of the season, George Kittle was the number 1 tight end in all of football. Now, some of those games came when Deebo Samuel missed some time, so you could say that there is a potential that Deebo being healthy means it could cut into George Kittle a little bit. But honestly, it could be the other way around as well. And the one thing I know that will happen with George Kittle, once they get inside the red zone, he's going to be the guy that Purdy's going to look to the most. I've got him listed as a 3 because putting him right here is essentially ranking him at his upside. But you could see him really fall anywhere between 2 and 5 as long as he gives you 15 healthy games this season. Number 3 is going to be Mark Andrews. Once again, he should be the primary target for Lamar Jackson heading into 2023. But the one thing that we have to keep in mind is that they have a few more weapons this year than what they've had in years past. Rashad Bateman still hasn't been fully healthy to begin training camp, but you've added OBJ, you've got Zay Flowers, who you drafted, you've still got the Duve himself, and they've added Nelson Aguilar as well, plus pass catching backs like J.K. Dobbins, and Gus Edwards works back there a little bit as well. It just seems like there's so many more options this year than what we've seen in years past. But the good thing about Mark Andrews is that their offensive coordinator is going to be a little bit more pass-centered than what we've seen the Ravens be like in the past. And because of that, it could lead him to more than enough value that you would need. Just keep in mind as well, Isaiah Likely might make his way out to the field a little bit more often. I don't think he takes over for Mark Andrews, though, unless Mark Andrews were to go down. TJ Hockenson sits at number 4 for me, and at one point in time this offseason, I had him as high as number 2. I am a little bit more worried now that they've added Jordan Addison, though. You can run a lot of 3 wide receiver sets with these guys, and maybe the volume does fall. And we see guys like Jordan Addison and KJ Osborne get a little bit more of the volume. But the good news for TJ Hockenson is that that could also lead to increased efficiency. We'll also see if Hockenson will be looked at in the red zone a little bit more often this year. So with him, I do think he's safe to finish within this area right here. If I were to rank him at like number 2 overall, I would probably say the risk factor for that Pat is more of like a 4. But right down here in the 4 area, I think that's actually pretty safe given the fact that we know he'll be utilized. Darren Waller at number 5 has a lot of upside for me, but he's a guy that has been banged up as of recent, and we also don't know how the chemistry with Daniel Jones will really carry over to begin the season. New team, new offense, new quarterback. What does it mean for Darren Waller? All of the volume in the world could be coming his way, given the fact that you don't have a whole lot of reliable options, and Jalen Hyatt there is a rookie. So because of that, Darren Waller automatically could just fall into being the number 1 target. But I also want to be very careful with it because I think we're going to see some days where Darren Waller just doesn't perform. Dallas Goedert at number 6, I think is going to be a very safe mid to low end tight end 1, even if it doesn't mean he wins you a lot of weeks. If you're drafting Dallas Goedert, you're essentially throwing in the white flag at the tight end position and saying, look, I don't want this position to win me any weeks. I really just want to get by without taking a bunch of zeros. And that's probably exactly what Dallas Goedert does. Last season, before he got hurt, he was really the number 2 target on that team behind A.J. Brown. Devontae Smith was barely a wide receiver 2 during that time frame. And I still believe that Dallas Goedert is going to be a guy for Jalen Hurts. Now, with the improvement of Devontae Smith and his growth, it could lead to the fact that, yeah, we see Dallas Goedert take a step back and be more like the target 3 in this offense. But even the target 3 in the Philadelphia Eagles high-powered offense is good enough for the tight end position. Honestly, the same exact thing with Pat Freiermuth. He's going to be a real safety blanket for Kenny Pickett, and he might not win you a ton of weeks, but he's going to keep you from getting zeros as well at the tight end position. Last season, he was one of the most targeted tight ends in all of football. This is a guy that Kenny Pickett really relied on week after week. I think the emergence of George Pickens this year, and I think obviously having Deontay Johnson will keep him from reaching top 2, 3, 4 tight end status. But once again, if you draft a guy like him, you're essentially throwing him in there knowing that he's not going to lose you a bunch of weeks, but you know he's not going to win you a bunch either. Kyle Pitts at number 8 is absolutely a number 5 on the risk scale for me because honestly, we just do not know where his career is headed. When Atlanta drafted him, the plan was for him to move out to wide receiver and due to his athleticism, become one of the best mismatches in all of football, but it just hasn't worked out. Whether it was inconsistencies in the offense or injuries, his first 2 years have been forgettable. So heading into year 3, we also find ourselves in a situation where he might not have as many targets as initially planned, given the fact that they've added Bijan Robinson, you've got Drake London with another full season under his belt, Cordarrelle Patterson is still going to be a part of the passing game, and this is a team that is going to want to run the football maybe more than 50% of the time. Kyle Pitts has a lot of upside, but I'm going to tell you right now, if you draft him, yes, he will probably win you a couple of weeks here and there, but there's also a really good chance he loses you weeks. David Njoku at number 9. To begin last season with Jacoby Brissett, David Njoku was the breakout star at the tight end position. Then he had some injury issues, and then Deshaun Watson came back. And it really wasn't until the end of the season that we started to see him pick up a little bit more again. After dealing with those injuries, he kind of felt lost in the offense. And maybe some of that was Deshaun Watson. Maybe they just didn't have that connection, but we did see it a little bit more in the red zone. So for David Njoku, putting him here, I'm really kind of saying at this point, he's going to be touchdown dependent for me. I don't think he gets the volume that we would like to see, but I do think he gets the looks in the red zone to put him within striking distance of the top 12 tight ends every week. Evan Engram for me is really tough at number 10. When he went to Jacksonville last year, I was like, man, I can't get hurt again by Evan Engram, but I would be ready for it. And he had a great campaign there with Trevor Lawrence. But adding Calvin Ridley back this season is going to throw a little bit of a wrench into potentially what could have been a bigger season. Evan Engram brings a lot of the same risks that a guy like Kyle Pitts and David Njoku do in front of him. They are guys that we absolutely could see have some great weeks because they are really, truly good weapons on the football field. But given the offense that they play in and given the dynamic of that offense, there might just be some weeks where they're left onto the side or even forgotten about because we see those wide receivers in that run game kind of take over. So Evan Engram, I think, falling right in here is going to be a really good bet bet for you. Now, if you wanted a hot take at the tight end position, it is me putting Hunter Henry at number 11. When they added Mike Gesicki over the offseason, it really showed the Patriots' hand at wanting to run a lot more 12 personnel, meaning that they would have 2 tight ends on the field at any given time. The last time Bill O'Brien was an offensive coordinator in New England, he did the same exact thing with Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez, and both of them finished inside the top 3 tight ends that season. Now, don't get this mixed up. Hunter Henry and Mike Gesicki are not Rob Gronkowski or Aaron Hernandez, but the game plan that Bill O'Brien has is going to make the potential for the tight end position to be very successful. But here's where things get really interesting, because for the last few months, I've been pointing to Hunter Henry as a late round sleeper for the tight end position. But now that training camp has started, we've actually seen that becoming a fruition, because when you look at it and when you read about the Patriots training camp, Hunter Henry's name is always brought up. He's being looked at on 7-on-7s, 11-on-11s. He's being looked at in the red zone. He's scored several touchdowns. Him and Mac Jones continue to connect, while Mike Gesicki hasn't done anything. If Hunter Henry can close in on at least 10 touchdowns this season and add a little bit of volume to go with it, knowing that the wide receivers that we have there probably aren't the most reliable in the world, this is a guy that I would put money on finishing inside the top 12 at the position this year and being one of the most valuable tight ends that you could spend a draft pick on. I'm going to go Dalton Kincaid at number 12. And I know that if you've listened to me enough, you've heard me warn you about drafting rookie tight ends, because historically, over the last 12.5 seasons, there's only been 3 tight ends to finish inside the top 12. And we also see a little bit of a Kyle Pitts type movement here, where the Bills drafted Dalton Kincaid not to be a true tight end, but to play more like in the slot. Now, here's why I believe in Dalton Kincaid a little bit more than what I did when Kyle Pitts came out. Because number one, the quarterback position is much different. Dalton Kincaid has a much better quarterback. And number two, the weapons around them. There's so many weapons around Dalton Kincaid that he's going to be left on a lot of one-on-one islands, and he's going to win some of those. So I do think the upside is more than good enough for him to reach just inside the top 12 tight ends. But once again, because there are so many weapons, if you try to overdraft him, I think you're going to end up a little bit disappointed with it. Dalton Schultz is going to come in at number 13 for me, and I think he's going to be a really nice safety blanket for CJ Stroud this season. But I also fully believe that he's going to be a guy that's never going to have eye-popping numbers for you. And I also don't believe he's going to be a huge red zone presence for them either. So when you take a look at his stat line, the volume might be okay, but I just don't think he has enough touchdowns this season to get inside the top 12. Tyler Higbee is going to come in at number 14. Why? Because who else does Matthew Stafford have to throw to outside of Cooper Kupp? Yeah, you've also got Van Jefferson, but it just feels like Tyler Higbee won't go away. Again, a lot like Dalton Schultz, where maybe he's not going to win you a ton of weeks, but he's a guy that if you throw in there, he's going to put up some decent numbers for you. These kind of guys in this area right now are ones that I'm looking at that don't have a ton of upside, but might be a good bye week fill-in or injury fill-in, because these are guys that also could see enough targets, even if the targets just make them okay for the week. I'm going to talk about the next two guys in the same breath, and that's Cole Kmet and Juwan Johnson, because both of these guys may not see the volume that we would have liked this year. Juwan Johnson was a big breakout candidate for me and a guy that I actually had a lot closer to the top 12. But unfortunately, since then, the Saints have been adding tons of tight ends, it feels like, even bringing Jimmy Graham back. So for Juwan Johnson and Cole Kmet, I think these are both guys that are going to be very touchdown dependent this year, but they're going to be big red zone threats for their team. So while they might not be guys that put up a ton of 50 or 60 yard performances, they are guys that could put up like 30, 35 yard performances in a game and also bring in a touchdown maybe every couple of weeks. Both of these guys have double-digit touchdowns written all over them. We just got to hope that the volume is there, at least in the red zone. Man, what could have been with my boy Chiggy Oko? I was so excited for him this season, and quite honestly, I'm not entirely off board. But the one thing about Chiggy Oko was the fact that he was just going to get a ton of targets. There wasn't really a wide receiver 2 option. And then they signed DeAndre Hopkins, who becomes the basically wide receiver 1, and Treylon Burks becomes the wide receiver 2. So for Chiggy Oko to give you a lot of fantasy value, I think unfortunately it would take an injury. Jelani Woods is another one of of those guys that I really view as being a touchdown dependent type player. And because there are a lot of question marks just about the Indianapolis offense as a whole right now, I'm keeping him a little bit lower. Jelani Woods for me though is more like a best ball guy. Maybe somebody that you add behind one of those top tier tight ends that you have, but that could haul in touchdowns every once in a while to give you those top 12 weeks that you might need, even if it doesn't end with a top 12 season. Listen, I'll be one of the first people to admit that Greg Dulcich probably could and should be a little bit higher, but I just think he's going to get overlooked in that offense quite a bit. Now, one thing that's kind of changed my tune a little bit is the fact that Javonte Williams is basically healthy out of nowhere, which means that Denver could say, hey, we're actually going to utilize the running game a little bit more than what we planned with Williams and Samaje Perine. And then you take a look at the wide receiver position: Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler, Marvin Mims. It did sort out a little bit with the season-ending injury to Tim Patrick, but that's still a lot of people that could potentially get fed over Greg Dulcich. And this is an argument that I hear a lot about Sean Payton loving his tight ends. Sean Payton loved one tight end, and that was Jimmy Graham. Greg Dulcich and Jimmy Graham are not the same guy. So while I do say, hey, if you think he should be higher, I agree with you. I think he should be higher too. I just can't do it right now because I think there's just way too many question marks surrounding him. And finally, Irv Smith Jr., because I do think he provides you some solid fantasy games this season, but those games will probably be the only 6 that he plays in and the others he's injured in, which stinks because Irv Smith Jr. is a good player and this is a great situation for him, but unfortunately he just has trouble staying healthy, and he was super inconsistent last year, one of the reasons Minnesota felt like they could move on. There you go, Headliner Nation, my top 20 tight ends heading into 2023. Make sure you hit that like button for me and comment down below and let me know one tight end that you would like to have maybe a little bit higher in your rankings than what I have them, and give me a good explanation why. If this video hits 1,000 likes, I'm gonna pick one of you that respond in the comments to get a free draft guide. And of course, if you're new here, you gotta subscribe and you gotta stick around, Headliner Nation. I appreciate y'all tuning into this video. Stay safe and healthy, and I'll catch y'all on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.